Now I will leave it to you, Hannah, to give us a 5-minute overview of where Positive Money came from and what it's trying to do and to change the money system. Thanks very much.
Thanks again for inviting us to be part of this festival. So Positive Money is a UK-based research and campaign organisation, as Henry says, trying to change the money and banking system. We're working to make it fairer, more sustainable and more democratic. We were founded, well, officially 10 years ago. This year is our 10th anniversary. We were founded in the wake of the financial crash, originally in the form of a blog written by a guy called Ben Dyson, who was writing about sort of why the crash had happened. So obviously picking up on the major narrative of the subprime mortgage crisis, but really also tying that to the problem of our debt-based money system, whereby we've handed the power to create money almost primarily over to private banks and sort of the trouble that causes. Obviously, and so have we, and we've sort of formalized the organization now into a strong research hub, which publishes reports, and then our campaigning arm, which I work on, which is trying, working with our supporter base, which is about 25,000 people in the UK, to try and bring about the changes that we'd like to see. And our three main areas of work for the last 2 or so years have been on greening the Bank of England and the rest of the financial system. We've also been advocating for a central bank digital currency, and we've also done, since cash is the only sort of form of democratic money we have in the country, since digital money is always all private bank money. So yeah, the way we work is we're sort of led by our economists and researchers who put together reports, 2 of which we published earlier this year via webinar due to the COVID restrictions. And then we have our policy and influencing team, which works to communicate those reports and policy asks with makers and also the media. And then the campaigning section that I work on is working with our supporters, who are just ordinary members of the public who are very keen and passionate about trying to change the money system, to bring those changes about with people-powered mechanisms. So that can be petitions, emailing their MPs, running educational sessions in their communities. So we have a local group network, around 12 local groups around the country that, obviously not for the last 6 months, but previously met once a month to sort of run educational sessions and sort of spread the word about what's wrong with our money and banking system and how we can change it, and also doing some direct actions, although again that's been put on hold unfortunately for most of this year. But yeah, we were often in the last few years very frequently outside the Bank of England with banners and posters trying to gain some media coverage. So particularly also over COVID, we've really turned our attention to the Bank of England's and the government's reaction to the economic crisis that COVID has caused. So our particular attention for the last 6 months has been the Bank of England's COVID facility, the CCFF, which is a sort of a scheme that they set up in partnership with the Treasury to create new money to basically bail out some of the biggest corporations in the UK. And originally our campaign ask was about transparency, because when the scheme was first set up, they were making companies sign confidentiality agreements and they weren't disclosing either the names of the companies or the amounts. So we ran a people-powered and media campaign around that, and we were successful, thankfully, and the bank sort of did a U-turn and available, and then I'll publish this data every Thursday and we track it. And since that win, we've now sort of pivoted that campaign to focusing on the lack of conditions that are attached to these bailout loans, essentially. So there are no social or environmental conditions attached to this money. So for instance, we've seen big companies like EasyJet and British Airways take hundreds of millions of pounds in newly created money and then go on to lay off thousands of staff, to not put forward any plans for changing their business, the Paris agreements. So that's sort of another area that we're trying to sort of to focus on as well. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much the overview there.
Thanks very much, Hannah. I mean, I think Positive Money is an amazing organisation and absolutely fascinating. Before we go, you gave a lot of detail. Obviously, you're doing a huge amount of detailed work, but I just thought, coming back sort of up to the sort of top level, I was just wondering, I mean, it seems to me Positive Money is an extraordinary organisation because I can't think of many, other organisations, around the world who campaign about money. Is that true? I mean, because the idea of money being a thing you campaign about, or that it affects the world as an entity, as a money system, it's a new idea, isn't it, to some extent?
Fairly new. It's not something that people instantly leap to, because people don't usually, I think, see it as value laden. They see money as sort of this abstract thing that just exists, but it's not really something that's used for, ulterior negative or hopefully potentially good reasons. But there are other organisations around. So we're umbrella organisations that work with the International Movement for Monetary Reform, the IMMR, which has groups all over the world. I think about 50 or so groups. But I believe we're the only ones with a sort of paid staff team that can dedicate full-time work to this issue. I think most of them are voluntary led, apart from our sister organisation, Positive Money Europe, which is based in Brussels and is sort of growing to about a similar size and capacity as we are.
And what is extraordinary as well is that your local groups, isn't it? Because again, the organisation seemed to really pick up on a popular feeling, didn't it? That this was something that people wanted to engage with. And you have, how many grassroots groups? You said 6, is it? Or how many local groups?
It's about 12.
Sorry.
It's about 12 at the moment, but activity can be hard to measure, and particularly of this last year, obviously, when they haven't been able to meet in person, we've seen that had a slight effect on activity. But it's fluctuated over time. I think in the earlier years, it was more up to about 25, because, yeah, as you say, the organisation actually blog written by a guy called Ben Dyson, and it was the popularity of that blog from just ordinary members of the public who wanted to learn more about this issue and wanted to find out why the crash happened, why is our money system broken, kind of thing. And it was sort of that public interest that really led Ben to be able to go on and secure funding and create the organisation in the first place.
It's very interesting, actually, that you can start an organisation with a blog. The power. It is said that the power of bloggers after the crash was extraordinary. Take someone like Frances Coppola, who started her blog just after the crash, and is now obviously a hugely respected person with a lot of following and so on. And so there's been this sort of space for new ideas to come out for people who don't have, who just put a blog up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really filling a gap in education, really, because we don't, and Ross will speak more on this later, I'm sure, from rethinking. But yeah, we're not teaching the economics or the money and banking system in our schools. People just don't understand how it works, and they are hungry to understand what is going on in the world around them and why things aren't working the way they should be and why we're in the mess we're currently in. So and part of our work is still educational, so we still share educational videos, and a lot of our social media content is still about that core message of conveying how does the money and banking system work now, as well as then advocating for how we think it should work in the future.
And with the sort of recent interest and increasing profile of modern monetary theory, which sounds awfully geeky, doesn't it? Sort of, what the hell's that? But it has got quite a lot of profile, hasn't it? And has that sort of increased the sort of positive money's profile as well?
I think to some extent, yeah. Always when you're going to open the field out to more ideas, I think that's always good, to get people talking about the issue. And I think MMT has been great in getting a lot of people to think more about the money and banking system. And yeah, we've seen our supporters get pretty fired up about it as well, although we've also divisions, because calling for isn't exactly modern monetary theory. I'm not going to dive into the detailed difference between them because it's quite theoretical and even I don't understand it. But we've got blogs on our website if anyone's interested in that. But yeah, so it has encouraged some debate and internal discussion, which is always actually quite healthy for us to be able to re-examine calling for and why that's different from MMT. I think it's been a helpful process for us as well.
It's very interesting, I think, I find anyway, that money, which, seems it's just coins, it's pounds, etc. People can get incredibly passionate and have really different views, aren't they? And I know that when modern monetary theory got a lot of profile with AOC in the US, then suddenly the great sort of Nobel Prize people like Paul Krugman, etc., came out to try and rubbish it, and because it was beginning to get a profile. And then you have these incredible fights on the social media, fights around, you know, seemingly quite technical issues, don't you?
I think sort of what you're saying there is sort of, you know, the status quo feeling challenged and feeling angry about that. But when, you know, that's healthy, they should be encouraging that. But yeah, obviously wanting to stay holding on to the power that the dominant economic system currently has, even though that's failing most people around in the UK and around the world. So we're kind of sometimes glad to see people get outraged about it, because, you know, they should be. You know, money touches everyone's lives. We all deal with it every day. The power, if we changed our monetary system to enact change across multiple sectors of our lives, I think it is huge.
Yeah, and now there's even, you know, people discuss the magic money tree, don't they, on whether there is one or not. And we have,
well, there are two.
There are two, and we have Johnson apparently saying clearly there will be no recession. So obviously you're right on the money. I am, by the way, I'm just sort of keeping asking questions, but I'd love to have some questions from other people and bring them up on the stage to join the discussion, because I don't know how many people know a lot about money. By the way, we have a lot of articles also in the Mint magazine. We've interviewed Randy Ray, who's one of the gurus of modern monetary theory, and one of our trustees is Anne Pettifor, who of course writes a lot about money. And of course, actually, interestingly, there was quite a sort of tension at one point between Anne Pettifor and people and what she was thinking, and positive money, wasn't there? Which actually, I think it's now all sort of history, but and was sort of resolved. But it's interesting, you know, within a set of people who are broadly on the same side, you can still get quite intense interactions, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you say, it's because people are so passionate. A debate is healthy. Questioning things is healthy. Working through things, yeah, I think is good. And yeah, we're big fans of Anne. The work she's done has been amazing, especially with the debt jubilee work that she did, obviously in the early 2000s. That was also ties a lot to our own work as well. Obviously, calling attention to the problem that the problem that both national and personal debt causes in our economy.
Brilliant. So if we got right, we've got someone. We got a question. Terry. Right, Terry, I'm going to bring you up. There you go.
I'm up. I'm here. Hello, Hannah. That was fascinating. And as Henry says, it's really unusual to hear about changing monetary theory. And my question I was just really curious to ask is about how what you're doing as a group is fascinating, brilliant. But can there be local individual actions taken to move forward?
Yes. Opportunities for individuals to use their own power to bring about change, and we have identified several ways that they can do this. So I think first and foremost, our work with the Bank of England. So the Bank of England is a democratic institution. It's accountable to the government, and obviously the government is accountable to us. So we have those democratic channels through which people can contact their MPs or local councillors, and also the Bank of England over the last 18 months, I believe, has been running regional citizens panels, which we encourage our supporters to attend, which gives them to question officials and ask them to explain what they're doing, or the decision process behind what they're doing. So there's that avenue, and then the same within that also goes for obviously the Bank of England then regulates the private banking system, so that's also a channel towards that activity. And then you have obviously the financial regulators that oversees the sort of the payment system, which is where our work on cash and central bank digital currency comes in a bit more as well. So we've done a lot. We did quite a bit during the last general election last autumn around protecting access trading closures, and free cash machine closures in the UK has just skyrocketed over the last few years, and that's really hit a lot of people hard. So really trying to raise that awareness, and yeah, so the individual action there was we encouraged supporters and people to go along to their local hustings and ask their MP candidates, what do you think about cash machine closures? Like, are you going to protect them? Yeah, so and then also petitions, which we've been doing a lot of this year when physical actions haven't been a possibility. So yeah, I guess in a nutshell, we do think there's a lot that individuals can do to try and change the money system.
I think you put your finger on it, and it's a bit of a theme with education about young people being aware that they can have a voice in actually making this change come about. So do you, when there's opportunity, go into schools, or not into schools, but provide materials for schools, perhaps? Have you got that?
Yeah, so we haven't
capacity?
done. Yeah, we haven't done that much work directly with schools. I know some of our local groups have gone into schools in their local areas in the past, or we've had some teachers in the network who have used our resources in their classes. But yeah, schools are not something that's currently a part of our work.
Well, that's fine, because actually there's another question that's come up that might be more relevant now, which is your view on the monetary system in relation to foreign aid and investments, and how you're looking at how money systems in the UK affect other countries. And that's come from Edna. So Edna, come and join us, please. That would be great for Hannah to be able to reply to you in person. So I think you can just put your camera and mic on, and that should get you up here. So you have a thing, Hannah? That's 2 questions, but hey, welcome, Edna.
Yeah, thanks so much, Hannah. It's a very interesting presentation there about money, monetary systems, especially in view of, thinking of new systems. And being from an African country, and especially Kenya, which has a lot of ties with the UK, like serious ties. Yeah, so that's why I asked if in your organizational, in your work, if you are, or you could think of looking at how the monetary system in the UK, and as you said, already how it's maybe affecting the people locally, but how also it affects people abroad, especially in countries like ours, where we receive a lot of aid from the UK, and also a lot of foreign, direct foreign investments. And from my experience and a little bit of maybe work that I've done, I would maybe suggest that the importance is because the mess that is out there, like in our countries, could affect, what happens in the UK, or the mess that is in the UK could affect our countries, because the money is flowing either way, both to government and also to private sector. And okay, I don't want to delve into it, but there are sectors that some of us have looked into, and there's a lot of negativity, negative investment, illicit flow of finances in name of aid, in name of investment, and such like things. Yeah, thank you.
It's absolutely a fantastic question and point to bring attention to. I guess I'm afraid I can't answer all of it, but I'll try to answer some of it, which is, I guess, one of the things we try to highlight in our work, particularly in the work we've done around greening the Bank of England and the financial system, is the disproportionate amount of international finance that flows through the City of London. And obviously, if corporations are based in the City of London, then they fall under the regulatory sphere of the Bank of England. So if we're able to sort of win through the Bank of England, that through to the private financial institutions that, as you say, have this huge international reach and impact around the world. So that's what would be the main answer to the question. I mean, on the whole, we do just focus mainly on UK policy. I mean, we've written blogs and a bit in the past, and some of our reports delve into the role of the IMF and the World Bank in setting up the disastrous financial system that we currently have, but it's not something that unfortunately we've had the capacity to dedicate more resources. But we're currently undergoing a re-strategy process for the next 5 years, and I know that's something Fran's really keen to think about more and embed that more in some of our work. So hopefully in a few years I'll be able to answer that question better. But yeah.
And we've got a final question, which we'll just take quickly from Wasima, which I think if you come up, which I think is quite a good wrap-up question. And Wasima, are you here?
Hi, Hannah.
Hello.
So I wanted to ask where your passion in advocating for this change in systems that have been in place for a very, very long time, like where that came from for you, and yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess like partly anger and frustration that like looking at the world around me and seeing things and wanting to change it and make them better. But I guess in terms of your sort of like structural part of your question, I guess for me, I kind of see campaigning on something like the money and banking system, or perhaps also education as well, because there's such fundamental issues. It's almost like if you were able to turn off the tap of an overflowing bath, you know, you could mop up the water on the floor and that would be sort of reacting to the short-term influences, but you know, you're not going to solve the problem unless you go right to the source. So I guess even though it's extremely difficult to change institutions as traditional like the Bank of England, if we can win there, then winning everywhere else will become so much easier, you know, because it is such a fundamental issue. So in some ways, I guess it's also a question of efficiency in my mind, like trying to do the thing that will have the most impact in a broad way. Yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's very inspiring. I really like that. Thank you.
Thanks, no
Brilliant.
worries.
Thank you very much, Hannah.
Mm.
That's been absolutely fascinating, and thanks very much for being a partner and supporting the festival. Now I will hand over to Terry to introduce Ross from Rethinking Economics.
Thanks, Henry. That's lovely. And thank you, Hannah. That was most fascinating. I never thought money could be so interesting.